This client purchased a wood door from another builder, and after only a few years, it had begun to crack and the joinery was failing. They then came to us and asked us to build them a brand new door because they knew we had the expertise and nearly 3 decades of experience building these units. This client's original door was done in maple, which wasn't the issue. Maple is one of the 4 species that we primarily offer to our clients. We offer maple, cherry, walnut, and ash, and then sometimes for a bit of an upcharge, we'll have white oak or sapele in our doors. But those 4 woods I mentioned first, we have really good experience with, and they tend to be very stable woods in this harsh North American climate. Some people would say that you need to use exotic woods or really hard woods like white oak exclusively to have success in exterior doors, but if you're following good joinery and you're using a high quality adhesive, you shouldn't have any problems. The reason that this client ultimately picked cherry was just simply because of the rich color that it offered. Cherry, when it's initially first finished, almost has a light pinkish hue, but over time as it ages, it gets this really rich dark brown color. So the stain you're going to see us put on later kind of mimics that dark brown color that the cherry is eventually going to fade into. The reason that we use a stain and we don't just put a clear coat and let it fade naturally is to try and give some UV protection. Any kind of exterior finish gets most of its UV protection from the stain, not the actual clear coat that goes on. The clear coat primarily protects the wood from moisture, but if you want to get any of that UV protection, it's very important to use a stain. When it comes to an adhesive, we like to use Titebond 3, and this isn't sponsored, even though we would like to be. It's just the best glue that we have found, and we have many decades using it, and even though it's overkill for interior projects, we like to use Titebond 3 on everything we do in our shop. There is some other variations of Titebond that you could try and use, but ultimately you might run into problems. One example of that would be using Titebond 2. Titebond 2 is a really good water-resistant glue, but it is thermoplastic, meaning that it can soften or reliquefy when exposed to heat. So if you have a door with a dark color that gets a lot of sun exposure, you can actually melt your glue and have separation in that joinery over time. Going back to the door for this client, we just about got the jamb assembled. So even our jamb components are all constructed from solid cherry. We're not using any composite materials or metal in this unit here. We like to feature that natural wood grain on the entire unit. All of these components are CNC machined, so we program and mock up everything in our office to make sure it's going to go perfectly, and then we can send those files out to our CNC machine to cut all that joinery, and then it gets time to glue everything together on the bench. And same thing like the rest of the components on the door, we're using that Titebond to secure everything in place. We're gluing those components together, and once we get this unit finished, we can then move on to the door itself. Before we move on to the door, we have to get the curved brick mold attached to this jamb. To do that, we just like to use a biscuit joiner to physically glue it onto place and secure that location. And all of this is then also machined on our CNC machine to make sure we're getting that perfect fit all the way around this unit. Now that we've got the jamb constructed, we can move on to the door itself. Just like the jamb, all of these components are going to be constructed from solid cherry. In our opinion, cherry is one of the best value woods that you can find on the domestic market these days. A lot of the material that you tend to get ends up being heavily figured, and you end up seeing that in a few of the components in this door. And in the past, cherry used to be on par with the pricing of walnut, but now the price of walnut has absolutely soared above that of cherry, and cherry's kind of stayed at this really good value wood. So for clients who are looking to save a little bit of money but still get a really nice, rich wood species, we highly recommend cherry to them. We start our process just by getting these pieces S4S so we can get them onto the CNC machine, so that we have a perfectly shaped piece that our CNC machine can reference to begin cutting all of the joinery. The first components that we're machining here are for the tongue and groove panel that's going to sit in the middle of this door. All of our doors feature a stile and rail construction, meaning that we have 4 main pieces that go around the outside frame and then a recess for a panel to sit in the middle. For our panels, we don't actually glue any of them together using Titebond 3 as we would for some of the other components on the door, but we do something quite a bit less standard, and we use silicone to fix these pieces together. It's not something that you see people do all the time, but we have been doing it for many decades now, and it's a really good solution to an adhesive that allows the expansion and contraction of the wood pieces but still maintains a waterproof seal. On a panel this large with a tongue and groove style construction, you wouldn't want to physically glue these together because you need them to float so that this panel isn't going to expand so much that it begins to separate your stile and rail joinery. Once we've got our panel glued up and everything is cured, we can get it onto the CNC machine to cut that curve shape to match the rest of the components on the door. As you can see, the rail components on this also have that same curve to match the eyebrow arch, and we have stile and rail joinery with dowels to further increase the strength machined on all the edges of these components. Once we get the rails and mullions glued on, we can move on to the stiles, and again, we're using Titebond 3 here to secure everything in place, and we usually go overboard with the glue just to make sure we have no chance of separation. We stand behind our doors with a 5-year guarantee against any failure of joinery or warpage, and in order to do that, we need to absolutely make sure that we're supplying a quality product to our customers. When it comes to an exterior door, a lot of the time you're going to run into those initial issues in that first 5-year window. Of course, as decades go on, it can be unpredictable to know exactly what's going to happen, but that initial shock of going through those first few seasonal changes is typically where things tend to go wrong, and that's exactly what happened on this client's first door that they had ordered. And although this looks like a little hobbit door or something, these are actually the side lights that are going to go on either side of this unit. This door was absolutely massive, so even the side lights are going to feature that same stile and rail construction with a tongue and groove panel in the middle, just a smaller version of everything. Once the side lights and door have been glued up and cured, it's back onto the CNC machine to cut everything down to its final size so that it's going to fit in the jamb, and then we can move on to some of the final details like hinging, bevels, sanding, and ultimately getting these doors hung. And now we can move on to the finishing process for this door. Just like our tables, we've moved exclusively to oil-based finishes on our doors, as we find we have a much better track record for success when using these over something like a sprayed polyurethane. We used to use sprayed polyurethanes on our doors, an exterior rated urethane, so they're a little more heavy duty than what we were putting on our tables. And in a best case scenario where a door would get very little sunlight, very little exposure to any elements, you could have that kind of finish last for many years, even decades, without needing any kind of maintenance. But as soon as you introduce any sort of sun exposure or any sort of rain or moisture that gets on those doors, the chance of flaking and peeling goes up exponentially. And it got to the point where it was actually seeming quite unpredictable. We would have doors that would get some exposure and maybe they would last through that 5-year warranty period without any issues. But then we had other doors that would have similar levels of exposure and they would begin to flake and peel after only a year in some of the worst cases. So this is something that we struggled with for a while. Most of our doors had no issue, but on those few that we did run into problems with, the process for refinishing was incredibly labor intensive because it wasn't just a matter of scuffing up the door and rubbing some oil on. You had to physically strip all of that lacquer or spray finish off the door and then have it resprayed in place. So it was a messy, dirty, and time-consuming process that ultimately ended up costing our clients a lot of money if the door was out of warranty. Now that we've switched to oil-based finishes, we're finding that by performing maintenance once about every 5 years, you can get all the same benefits of protection of a urethane-based finish without the same failure points. It does require that little bit more maintenance. Like I said, it's usually about once every 5 years. We recommend our clients scuff the door up and rub some more oil on, or they can call us to come do it for them. And by doing that, you're just kind of rehydrating the pores of the wood, you're sealing everything off, and then once that oil is cured, we like to go over everything with a layer of our ceramic coating, and that's just going to help any liquids bead off the surface, and it's also going to bump up the UV protection even further. And by using this new finishing combination, our finishing recalls for doors have almost went down to zero, and all we're doing at this point is little bits of maintenance here and there to keep these doors looking brand new. So if any of you have any wooden projects that you're doing outside, I would highly recommend you look into oil-based finishes. We have been liking the products that Osmo offers. They have a full range of stain colors, and then they also offer this 420 UV protection oil is what it's called, and that's just a clear coat. So after we apply our stain, we go over it with the clear coat, and then like I said, we top it off with that ceramic, and this combination has just been excellent for us. Once we're done with our finishing process, we can begin to assemble the door unit to prepare for the installation. To secure the side lights in place, we have an adhesive tape that goes around the bottom of the unit, and then we have screws that go directly into the side to fix those side lights into a secure location. And it's not just any adhesive tape that we're using, it's almost like an aircraft grade tape that creates a permanent weatherproof seal that is very, very strong. Even if you tried to kick one of these side lights out without us having the screws in there, there's almost no way you'd be able to break the seal on that tape without physically prying something out and breaking parts of the door. Once the side lights are in, we can then move on to putting the glass panels in, and we use a similar system. So there's a little rail that's been machined on the door already. We can then put our adhesive tape down, we drop in our pieces of glass, and then we have moldings that get nailed around the entire outside of that sealed unit. We already had the locksmith come and put the full mortise lock set on this door, and our final step is to install the strike plate, and then we can get this loaded onto our trailer, head out to our client's home, and rip out that old door that's fallen apart. As you can see, their old door is very similar, I guess mostly in that it has that same eyebrow arch. We've changed things up a bit by carrying more of those arches through the rails featured in the rest of the door and the side lights. But the real problem with this door is all of the finish was peeling off, probably because it had a spray finish on there, and especially towards the bottom where it was getting more sunlight, the joinery was coming right apart and you could begin to see all the way through the door.
Close the door as much as you can.
There's nothing up there.
Okay. All right, on the floor. Okay.
I'll take the phone.
Okay. 24. Cute. So then I think we could fill this with the expanding foam too.
Is it my piece? I
got no problem with that, but I think we're gonna have to go wireless.
It's 2460 to the drywall. So that's 22 mils we have to go up, so it might be okay.
Want me to try to move it over more, or can we get
that carpet down.
All right, so we can unwrap it.
So,
Put the carpet down.
It's a jam divider, right? There's no room on the side really.
I don't think so.
Once you go to tip it.
Okay, let's see.
Down with you. And we don't have a lot of room. We have like an inch.
So how about if I fail, man?
Can we go up?
You ready?
Okay. It's easy. Yeah. Okay, we're going down. Kurt, let it slide down. Okay. Going up. Up more. Okay, we gotta hold the weight.
Doing such a good
We
job.
hit the bottom?
Such a good job.
This is shitty fucking excellent.
Such a good job, you guys.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So now let's just watch the drywall.
Let's do this side. Let it start to vibrate. I'm like, okay, let it. Oh yeah.
So
we gotta go.
it's not straight. I'm trying to pivot the bottom like this and lean the top over.
Yeah, that's it.
Hit each other. Yeah.
Learn me a lesson.
Beautiful.
Yeah, you can.
Very good. Okay. Good enough. Yeah.
Well, we were thinking
Yeah.
that the jam was going to be the other way from the wall. So this was going to be our spacer.
I got it. I got it.
Easily.
Oh yeah.
Right.
I mean, it'd be
But
hard
you gotta.
The thing is too, you're gonna match the curve here, so it's gonna not go perfect, but it can
I mean, if you had a small trim router or something like that, you could come along and go, "Grr,"
yeah.
but you just have to figure out how far in, and then you got to cut a little shim, and we can nail these little shims in here. And have we got a trim router? Do we need to send John to get a
We
trim?
don't have a trim ladder.
Okay.
No.
Well, we
I
can get
know-
Ben to bring one. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, I was gonna say that. Like the only other thing I could think is
And a flush trim bit.
We can
Yeah.
use that.
we could set the
That
power
extra
plane. I was
piece.
thinking.
Yeah, but the power planer doesn't go that deep
No. Okay.
to cut it.
I thought it would go. I thought that one went. I think 3/8 deep. I thought that'd be deep enough. I like the.
Just hold your hand against the wall, like behind the casing.
It should be a little bit longer.
No, that way. So you put one here and one where you are. Come at. Come at.
And here is a look at the finished installed door. We have to give a huge thank you to our client for trusting us throughout this process, especially considering that they already had a bad experience with buying a previous solid wood door. And to recap, this door is constructed from solid cherry. We finished it using Osmo oil and then protected it with a top coat of our Black Forest ceramic coating. And we had our own team travel to our client's home to install this. We would love to hear your thoughts on this door in the comments below, and let us know if you like the look of it over that old door.